Hey everyone, welcome back to XRP on Moon, the place where we dive deep into everything XRP, from market moves to breaking news that the mainstream media will never tell you. Today we're tackling a topic that has been buzzing across crypto communities and social media: why literally everyone seems to be wrong about XRP's price right now. That's right. Whether it's analysts, influencers, or even longtime holders, the narratives around XRP's value are off, and you need to understand why before making any move. So grab a pen and paper, because what I'm about to share could completely shift your perspective on XRP and the opportunities it's presenting. For months, the conversation around XRP has been dominated by predictions that range from it's going to zero to it's about to hit $10, $20, or even $50. Headlines are sensational, tweets are flying, and YouTube is flooded with takes that are often more noise than insight. But here's the problem: most of these so-called experts are only scratching the surface. They focus on price charts, ignore the bigger picture, and miss the most critical elements that drive XRP's future. And that's why, if you rely solely on conventional wisdom, you could be blindsided. XRP isn't just another coin following Bitcoin's movements. It's part of an evolving financial ecosystem that could disrupt payments, banking, and cross-border transactions in ways that are invisible to many investors right now. The first thing we need to understand is why the mainstream is wrong about XRP's price. Most analyses treat XRP like a speculative asset, similar to meme coins or small cap tokens, where price swings are purely driven by hype or fear. But XRP has a unique function. It's deeply connected to real-world banking and payment networks through Ripple, the company behind it. This means its adoption isn't just about trader sentiment. It's tied to tangible partnerships, regulatory progress, and global financial infrastructure. When banks, fintechs, and payment providers integrate XRP, they create demand that's fundamentally different from normal crypto speculation, yet very few price forecasts factor in these developments accurately. Now let's talk about one of the most misunderstood aspects: market sentiment versus actual utility. Many people panic when XRP drops 10%, 20%, or even 50% in a month, thinking that this reflects failure. But here's the nuance. Price dips in XRP often happen before major announcements or institutional adoption events. Savvy investors who understand the underlying technology know that short-term volatility does not necessarily indicate long-term failure. Instead, it's often a market overreaction, a classic setup for strategic accumulation. This is where the narrative that everyone is wrong becomes critical. Those who are panicking or selling off are missing the strategic advantage that the informed holders have. And we can't ignore the regulatory angle, which continues to be one of the biggest drivers of XRP's price misunderstandings. The SEC lawsuit against Ripple has cast a shadow over XRP for years, leading to countless incorrect price predictions. Many claim that XRP can't recover or grow until the lawsuit resolves, but this is a simplistic view. Ripple's legal team has consistently made progress, and recent developments show that courts are recognizing the unique nature of XRP as a digital asset. This is a game changer because regulatory clarity often acts as a catalyst, and once the broader market acknowledges that XRP isn't just a security, the price reaction could be substantial. Analysts ignoring this angle are, frankly, setting themselves up to be proven wrong. Another layer that's often overlooked is the macro crypto environment. While Bitcoin and Ethereum dominate headlines, XRP's movements are sometimes incorrectly correlated with these assets. Experienced traders know that XRP's price often moves independently due to network adoption, liquidity demands, and strategic partnerships. When Bitcoin dips, XRP might stay steady or even rise, which directly contradicts many popular narratives. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it reframes how you think about risk, timing, and accumulation strategy. Moves forward, let's address the psychological factor: fear and greed. Social media amplifies panic and hype, leading to the false belief that XRP's short-term swings define its future. The reality is that XRP's long-term trajectory is driven by adoption, regulatory clarity, and network utility, not just viral headlines. This is why so many predictions fail. They're based on emotions, not fundamentals. For those who truly understand XRP's ecosystem, the wrong predictions are actually an opportunity. Every time the public panics or media spreads misinformation, it creates a moment where informed investors can position themselves strategically for the next wave of growth. So, as we kick off this deep dive, remember this. Everything you've been hearing about XRP's price, from extreme highs to catastrophic lows, needs to be questioned. The mainstream narrative is flawed, the headlines are misleading, and the majority of so-called experts are missing the bigger picture. Now that we've established why mainstream predictions are often flawed, it's time to dig deeper into the real forces that drive XRP's price, the ones that the media and casual analysts either ignore or completely misunderstand. First, let's talk about adoption in the financial sector. XRP isn't just a cryptocurrency traded on exchanges for speculative purposes. It's a bridge currency designed for fast, low-cost cross-border transactions. This utility alone separates it from the majority of other digital assets, yet so many price forecasts fail to account for it. Every time a bank or financial institution adopts XRP for payments or liquidity management, it increases real-world demand. Unlike other coins that rely purely on hype cycles, XRP's adoption is measurable, practical, and ongoing. One of the biggest misconceptions is that XRP's value is entirely speculative. In reality, Ripple has been steadily building partnerships with hundreds of financial institutions worldwide, from major banks in Asia to fintech companies in Europe. Each integration may not make headlines, but it strengthens the network effect and adds real utility to XRP. When you understand this, it becomes clear that price movements are not random. They are responses to tangible developments, regulatory shifts, and liquidity flows. In fact, the market often underestimates the lag between adoption and price recognition, which is why many analysts are consistently wrong. Another crucial factor is XRP's liquidity on exchanges and OTC markets. Unlike some cryptocurrencies with thin liquidity or low trading volumes, XRP is heavily traded, yet large transactions often occur off-exchange. This means whales, institutional players, and banks can move significant amounts without creating massive price swings. Many people look at price charts in isolation and assume they reflect the full picture. The truth is, on-chain data, liquidity pools, and institutional flows tell a far different story than simple candle charts. Ignoring these elements is why predictions based solely on technical analysis are often wildly inaccurate. Let's also consider the role of regulatory clarity. The SEC lawsuit has dominated XRP headlines for years, and while it initially caused fear, the legal process has revealed insights that many investors overlook. Courts are now recognizing the unique structure of XRP and the way it operates as a digital asset in payment systems. These developments are subtle, but they have enormous long-term implications. Once regulatory clarity is fully established, it could unlock massive institutional interest. And this isn't just theory. Ripple has repeatedly demonstrated resilience, strategic negotiation, and compliance efforts that signal XRP is positioning for mainstream adoption, not temporary hype. Now think about the macro environment. Cryptocurrency markets don't exist in isolation. Factors such as global financial trends, interest rate policies, and banking sector reforms all play a role in XRP's trajectory. Unlike Bitcoin, which often mirrors macro sentiment more directly, XRP reacts to a mix of adoption signals, liquidity demands, and regulatory updates. This explains why many predictions fail. Analysts assume XRP moves the same way as Bitcoin or Ethereum, ignoring its unique market dynamics. If you want to understand XRP's price correctly, you must consider these broader forces alongside technical trends. We also need to tackle the psychological missteps in the community. Fear, FOMO, and herd behavior distort perceptions of XRP's value. People panic during corrections, sell prematurely, or chase short-term trends without considering adoption fundamentals. This is precisely why the mainstream is wrong. They equate short-term volatility with failure. In reality, XRP's short-term dips often create opportunities for accumulation by informed investors. Those who understand this dynamic are positioned to benefit when adoption and regulatory clarity translate into sustained price growth. One of the most ignored points is XRP's role in bridging traditional finance with the crypto ecosystem. Many forecasts treat XRP like a speculative altcoin instead of a tool that can disrupt cross-border transactions. Ripple's technology enables banks to settle payments almost instantly, significantly reducing costs. Each new partnership or corridor opened for XRP strengthens its intrinsic value, and this is independent of hype cycles. The market often misses these developments because they don't immediately impact the spot price, but the long-term implications are huge. By understanding adoption, liquidity, regulation, macro factors, and psychology, it becomes clear why everyone is wrong about XRP's price. People focus on charts, memes, or social media hype while missing the strategic, foundational moves happening behind the scenes. XRP isn't a gamble, it's a financial infrastructure asset that is quietly building momentum, one partnership, one regulatory clarification, and one liquidity corridor at a time. If you can see beyond the short-term noise, you start to recognize the patterns that the so-called experts overlook. At this stage, it's crucial to examine the real-world adoption stories behind XRP because this is where the market often gets it wrong. When people speculate about XRP's price, they rarely look past the charts or social media hype, but Ripple has been quietly building a global network of financial partnerships that provide real utility for the token. Think about corridors where payments once took days and huge fees. XRP is now enabling near-instant settlements at a fraction of the cost. Every bank, remittance company, or fintech that integrates XRP is essentially creating new, tangible demand that doesn't depend on speculative trading. And yet, mainstream predictions rarely factor in this kind of adoption-driven momentum. Let's break down some of these adoption moves. In Asia, Ripple has partnered with multiple banks and financial institutions to create cross-border corridors, which allow businesses and individuals to send money faster and cheaper. While these integrations may not make daily headlines, each one strengthens XRP's role in global payments. This isn't hypothetical, it's real demand being created outside of exchanges. And here's the catch. Price charts won't immediately reflect these developments, which is why casual analysts assume XRP is stagnant or declining. In reality, the groundwork for long-term price growth is being laid quietly and strategically. Then there's the matter of onboarding institutional investors. Ripple has consistently worked to bring in hedge funds, liquidity providers, and payment processors who require large volumes of XRP for operations. Unlike retail trading, which can spike or crash prices due to emotion, institutional adoption creates stable, ongoing demand. This is one of the reasons why short-term price dips should not be interpreted as failure. These are strategic opportunities where the market temporarily undervalues XRP while institutions quietly accumulate. In other words, the wrong predictions aren't just mistakes. They're a reflection of observers failing to understand the structural forces at play. Another overlooked factor is the evolution of XRP's technology itself. Ripple continuously updates its network to handle higher transaction throughput, reduce costs, and improve reliability. This is critical because price is ultimately influenced by usability. A token with high utility is far more likely to maintain or increase value over time. Yet when people look at XRP, they often see only a number on a chart instead of a sophisticated, constantly improving infrastructure. The narrative that XRP is stagnant is therefore not only misleading, it's fundamentally wrong. Now consider the interplay between regulatory clarity and market psychology. As Ripple progresses through legal hurdles and clarifies XRP's standing as a digital asset, confidence in the token grows among institutions and savvy investors. This shift doesn't always happen overnight. It's a slow-building wave that mainstream predictions consistently miss. Analysts tend to react to volatility rather than anticipate the long-term trajectory driven by regulatory certainty. Once this wave hits, the market could experience a dramatic revaluation, and those who ignored adoption, liquidity, and regulation will be left wondering what happened. It's also worth discussing liquidity corridors and capital efficiency. XRP isn't just being traded, it's actively used to settle payments across borders. This creates recurring demand because financial institutions need to hold XRP to operate efficiently. Unlike other cryptocurrencies that rely purely on speculation, XRP has inherent transactional demand, which anchors its value in ways that technical charts cannot always capture. Every time a bank chooses XRP over fiat for settlement, it reinforces the token's utility, creating a stable foundation for future price movements. We need to address how mainstream narratives are shaped. Many price predictions are influenced by social media trends, sensational headlines, and short-term hype rather than deep analysis of fundamentals. This is why the majority of experts get it wrong. They assume XRP behaves like speculative tokens with no real-world use. when in reality, its adoption and technological utility make it a fundamentally different asset class. Understanding this difference is key to seeing beyond the hype and recognizing the opportunity that others consistently miss. So, if you've been following mainstream predictions and feeling confused or frustrated, it's not your fault. The information is skewed. XRP's price trajectory isn't random, and it's not just a matter of luck. It's the product of adoption, regulatory clarity, institutional involvement, and technology enhancements. And this is exactly why everyone gets it wrong. They see volatility and assume failure, but those who dig deeper see the structural forces quietly shaping the token's value. Now that we've examined adoption, institutional involvement, and technology, it's time to focus on timing and market cycles, because understanding when XRP is likely to move is just as important as knowing why. One of the main reasons everyone gets XRP's price wrong is that they assume it reacts instantly to developments. The truth is, financial markets, especially one tied to adoption and regulatory progress like XRP, operate in cycles. These cycles often lag behind the news and fundamentals, which creates opportunities for those who understand the underlying patterns. Let's start with the short-term cycle. XRP, like other cryptocurrencies, experiences volatility based on liquidity, market sentiment, and macro events. Short-term dips and spikes are natural and do not necessarily indicate failure or success. In fact, some of the most profitable accumulation opportunities occur precisely during these temporary declines. Traders who panic sell during these periods often miss the rebound triggered by adoption announcements or regulatory updates. Timing isn't about predicting the next minute's candle. It's about recognizing patterns that signal structural demand is building underneath the surface. Next is the medium-term cycle, which is heavily influenced by adoption milestones and regulatory clarity. As Ripple continues forming partnerships and clearing legal hurdles, XRP is positioned for significant reevaluation. For example, every new corridor opened by Ripple for cross-border payments doesn't immediately spike the price, but it increases adoption, network usage, and demand steadily. Analysts focused on short-term charts often miss these incremental but powerful developments. Medium-term investors who understand these cycles can strategically accumulate XRP ahead of broader market recognition, capitalizing on undervalued moments created by mainstream misinterpretation. Then there's the long-term cycle, which is where XRP's transformative potential comes into play. Over several years, as global finance gradually integrates blockchain solutions for efficiency and transparency, XRP's unique utility as a bridge currency could propel demand exponentially. This is not a speculative projection. It's based on observable adoption trends, increasing liquidity, and Ripple's consistent strategic expansion. Those who understand the long-term vision see XRP not as a volatile altcoin, but as a foundational asset in a new financial infrastructure. Mainstream media, focused on daily price swings, rarely communicates this vision, which is why they continually get it wrong. Another critical element is market sentiment versus institutional behavior. Retail investors are highly reactive to social media narratives, often amplifying fear or greed. Institutions, on the other hand, operate on data, regulatory confidence, and operational needs. XRP's price moves will eventually reflect the alignment between these two forces, but it takes time. The difference between short-term perception and long-term reality creates windows of opportunity for informed investors. Understanding when the market is overreacting versus when structural adoption is genuinely taking effect is key to navigating XRP effectively. We also need to consider macro events, which play a surprisingly significant role in timing. Global economic trends, currency fluctuations, banking reforms, and even geopolitical shifts can influence cross-border payment demand. XRP, with its real-world financial utility, is uniquely positioned to benefit when traditional systems experience friction or inefficiency. Analysts who ignore macroeconomic factors often mispredict XRP's price because they fail to recognize how institutional adoption accelerates precisely when these inefficiencies are exposed. Then comes the psychological aspect. Patience. Too many investors expect instant gratification, reacting to every headline or price dip. But XRP's growth story is cumulative, built over months and years. Short-term volatility is a feature, not a bug, and those who can remain patient while monitoring adoption, legal clarity, and liquidity trends will be the ones to profit. Timing isn't just about price charts, it's about understanding when structural forces are aligned with market opportunity. Moves forward, we have to acknowledge the disconnect between media narratives and reality. Analysts and influencers often chase sensational headlines or short-term price movements. They rarely incorporate adoption cycles, regulatory milestones, and institutional involvement into their forecasts. This is why everyone consistently underestimates or misreads XRP's potential. Recognizing this disconnect is empowering because it allows you to see the opportunities that others overlook. When adoption, regulation, and liquidity align, the market will eventually correct itself, and those prepared will be ready to capitalize. Understanding XRP's timing requires looking beyond price swings. It's about cycles, short-term reactions, medium-term adoption milestones, and long-term structural growth. It's about distinguishing emotion-driven retail behavior from institutional strategy, and it's about aligning your perspective with reality rather than hype. When you approach XRP this way, it becomes clear why the mainstream consistently misjudges the price. They see volatility, but they miss the undercurrents driving real, sustainable demand. As we reach the final part of this series, it's time to pull everything together and look ahead at what's coming for XRP, why it matters, and how you can approach it strategically. By now, you should have a clear understanding of why everyone has been wrong about XRP's price. It's not random, it's not purely speculative, and it's not a matter of hype. It's a combination of adoption, regulatory clarity, liquidity, macro factors, and market psychology, and these forces are quietly shaping XRP's trajectory for the months and years ahead. Let's start with future adoption catalysts. Ripple is actively expanding its network of financial institutions, payment providers, and fintech partners. Each integration may seem small individually, but collectively they create exponential demand for XRP. Consider corridors connecting Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Ripple is building infrastructure that allows businesses and individuals to move money faster and cheaper than traditional banking methods. Every new partnership, every successful pilot program, and every integration with cross-border payments increases the utility and credibility of XRP, which ultimately feeds into its price. Another key catalyst is regulatory clarity. The ongoing dialogue between Ripple and global regulators is critical because it sets a precedent for institutional adoption. Once XRP is clearly recognized as a legitimate digital asset for financial operations, large-scale adoption from banks and corporations is likely to accelerate. Market participants who underestimate this factor are consistently wrong about XRP's price. Regulatory clarity doesn't just remove uncertainty, it actively unlocks institutional demand that has been waiting on the sidelines, and that demand can create significant upward pressure on price over time. We also need to focus on technological evolution and network efficiency. Ripple's updates to the XRP ledger enhance speed, reduce transaction costs, and increase scalability. Unlike other cryptocurrencies that rely purely on speculation, XRP is improving its underlying infrastructure to serve real-world needs. As adoption grows, technical upgrades reinforce the value proposition, ensuring that XRP remains a viable and desirable tool for banks and payment networks. Over time, this creates a structural foundation that supports long-term price growth independent of short-term market swings. Then there's the macroeconomic environment, which cannot be ignored. Global financial instability, currency fluctuations, and inefficiencies in traditional cross-border payments can drive demand for fast, low-cost alternatives like XRP. While mainstream analysts may focus narrowly on price charts, the reality is that XRP thrives when traditional systems falter. Recognizing this dynamic allows investors to anticipate moments when adoption and demand could accelerate, creating price momentum that contradicts mainstream predictions. We have market psychology and strategic positioning. Most investors focus on short-term swings and viral headlines, but informed participants recognize that XRP's real value is rooted in utility and adoption. Patience, careful observation, and understanding structural forces provide a significant advantage. The disconnect between media narratives and underlying reality is not a liability. It's an opportunity for those who are paying attention. Each time the mainstream misreads XRP, informed investors can position themselves ahead of the market, capitalizing on undervaluation. Before we conclude, it's important to highlight that while the potential for XRP is substantial, risk management is critical. Crypto markets are volatile, and XRP is no exception. Past performance does not guarantee future results, and no amount of adoption, regulatory clarity, or technical improvement guarantees immediate price gains. Always make informed decisions, diversify your portfolio, and never invest more than you can afford to lose. This series is meant to provide insights, context, and analysis, not financial advice. Adoption, institutional involvement, regulatory developments, technical upgrades, macroeconomic factors, and market psychology all combine to shape its price in ways that most analysts fail to understand. Short-term volatility can obscure the bigger picture, but those who study the underlying drivers see the opportunity clearly. XRP is not a gamble based on hype. It's a financial infrastructure asset quietly building a foundation for long-term growth. By focusing on these structural forces rather than sensational headlines, you can better understand the market and make strategic, informed decisions. Remember, the mainstream may continue to get it wrong, but now you have the knowledge and insight to see beyond the noise. Stay informed, stay patient, and approach XRP with a perspective rooted in understanding, not speculation. That is how real opportunities in this market are discovered and leveraged.